Hello, hello. This is Bossa in Lagos, and
Shola Ajayi in Lagos.
we are here to talk about your
My mama.
your family history interview with Yagba, grandma. So, tell us, what was it about your grandma that made you want to sit down for a structured interview? You're always talking to family, but we're not always talking about the things that we really need to know. What made you want to sit and talk with her?
My grandmother had just clocked like 104 or something. We had just found out her real age.
Wow.
Yeah, my mom's cousin is the one. My mom's older cousin is the one that told her like, "Oh no, my mom's no longer in her 90s. She's like 104." And it's
Wow.
like, "Oh my God, this woman has like she's lived a long. She's seen a lot."
Yes.
So the hope was that by talking, I would hear about like her childhood and like what life was like for her.
And what did she say when you said you want to interview her?
She didn't want to do it though, especially once I hit it record because I used my phone. But my grandmother's name is Mrs. Patience Omolara Odukoya, and she is from Ondo State by the water. They call it the waterside Mahitenjo. And she basically, oh man, she's just had such an interesting life. But her mom, from what my mom says, her mom was just opened her house to everyone. People could come, eat, things like that. But my grandmother was really, really smart. But because of the time, she wasn't allowed to go to school. All her brothers went to school, and she wasn't allowed. And when she asked, they were like, "Oh, try and see if your hand can reach the other side of your ear, and if it can't, you can't go." And she was like, "It can't reach, man." Um, so I really wanted to hear about what growing up was like for her. Like what games she wanted to play. And did she have a best friend? But when we started talking, and I had did the interview like 3 times. I did it with two of my cousin, like a different cousin each time, and then my mom. I think the best interview was with my mom because I think she understood what it was that I was trying to do, and my cousins were like, "I beg," you know.
Why
Um,
was it important to do the interview kind of in a communal way?
hmm.
The first time with your cousins, the second time with your mom.
Yeah, the challenge for me and my grandmother is that my Yoruba is not good and she doesn't speak English. So I was looking for people that could translate for me. So I tried to grab whoever was available who would make time for it. But my second cousin, my grandmother loves this kid. So she was laughing in the interview. She was like, "What kind of questions are these?" I wanted to know what games she played as a kid. Did she play make believe? Did she have a favorite board game? Because she likes playing IO and Ludo now. And she basically just talked about how she didn't have time to play. She was a kid that was working. She's like, she was working, and there wasn't anything like playing. You know what I mean? It doesn't sound like she had much of a childhood. Which was like so, because she's so serious. She can be so serious. She can be very playful, but she's so serious sometimes, and very particular, and very. She can be harsh sometimes. She's no nonsense. But she can be playful.
So tell us a bit about the interview that you had where your mom participated as the third party. And I understand that, you know, it was helpful to have someone who was fluent to
Mm-hmm.
help translate. But I wonder if having a third party had an impact that went beyond translation.
Yeah, I think it did because I feel like the questions that I was asking my grandmother, my mom had never asked her. So it was new information for her as well. Like she was like, really? My grandmother told a story about how there was a missionary that wanted to take my grandmother to England. And her mom was like, "You're not taking my child. She has to work. She's here. And the person was like, "She's very smart. She would do well. I'll put her in school, stuff like that." Her mom was like, "No, no way. You're not taking this girl." My grandmother could have been president of this country. She's so brilliant. And she didn't go to school or anything. And I think that was the first time my mom had heard that story. My mom recently just took her to her village, back to her village. Everyone was so happy to see her, and they were just praying like that they pray that they could live this long and look this good. You know what I mean?
Interviewing someone who's over 100 years old is a very rare experience. Not only has she seen a lot in her own life, but she has lived, I would say, by some measures, longer than the country has been around. By other measures, almost as long.
Yeah.
So her life is also important for a broader history beyond her as an individual. But between the nation and the individual, there's also the family. So, how do you think learning about your grandmother more deeply, learning about the things that you wanted to know, how do you think that impacts, your sense of your family and who you all are, and who you all are to each other?
I like that question. It was a great privilege to be able to interview her. I wish that I had done it years prior to when she had more energy, and probably more patience for like me recording it on the phone. Even with the little bit I got, I like right now my big thing is that I wish I could speak fluent Yoruba. I feel like I just scratched the surface of stories. She told me like how she used to get to Lagos from Ondo State, like that they walked and they would stay at different people's houses and buy things and sell and blah blah. They would do that week after week after week. At such a young age, she was doing that, and it just shows how resilient she is and how that spills over into like my mom, into my mom's sisters. Just seeing how things have changed from her perspective. You know what I mean? When she was young, people in her village were building their own boats. You know what I'm saying? It was just so great to hear like, oh, we were doing that already. You know what I'm saying? Even before the British came, we were already doing so much. And she got to see that, and I'm sure it's such a strange world to her now. So it has a huge impact. Like having her has a huge impact on my family specifically, because I feel like we get some insight into like what life is like before then, before colonization and everything with the British.
So from producers to consumers, maybe she has seen that shift in Nigerian cultures. Well, you're in the legacy of being a producer because you're a creative and you're always making things. I guess the last thing I would want to ask has to do with the language because, you talked about she had the regret that she never really got to go to school and explore that dimension of her intelligence. And you have the regret that you are not fluent in Yoruba, and so you feel like it limits your communication. A lot of people might feel that way. If I'm not fluent in a language, then, I can't really talk or communicate. What would you say to someone who feels like the language is not a barrier, but something that holds them back from getting into their family history more deeply?
I mean, even the fact that there's a language barrier for me, it was a great experience, Even with having the opportunity to speak to her in this way and ask these questions inspires me more. Like I've already registered for my classes, Yoruba classes, and hoping to do like conversational tutoring or something with folks when I get back to the States. And obviously in Nigeria I still practice, but I would love to be able to have a full out conversation with her before she leaves this world. You know what I'm saying? So I don't think any person should give up because of the language barrier, that they should still figure out a way to. There's other people that can hopefully translate for you. And hopefully that would inspire someone, maybe not so much learn the language, but at least inspire them to have this story. They have a little piece of it, even if it's not the whole thing, even just a little bit is great. Because I look at her so differently now. Just a whole nother perspective, how strong she is, the fact that she like walked to Lagos from Ondo State, as a young person, and she was doing that frequently. She put her brother's kids through school and so many other kids, even though she didn't go. You know what I mean? She built her own house. People still rent it out now. She did a lot.
So what you ended up gaining through learning about her and more about the family history um, was worth so much more, despite um, the language difference between you two.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Shola, for talking to us.
Thank you so much for asking. Yeah, I'm glad I got a chance to do it.